Here's a basic Ableton Live mastering chain that I would use if I was just going to use Ableton stock only plugins to master a song. I wouldn't do this personally because there are other plugins I like, but here you go. So the first plugin I would use is Utility. Utility is a great way of making sure that the gain going into your other plugins isn't too hot, but it also has this little width feature on it which increases the side signal or decreases the side signal. When mastering, sometimes it can be good to figure out whether the song needs to be a little bit wider or a little bit more narrow. It is possible, and a lot of songs do need to be a little bit more narrow so the side signal isn't too loud compared to like the vocals and the guitar and like the bass and the drums that are in the center. Things that are in the center, sometimes you want to decrease that. So this little width control can be quite useful to sort out the width of the song for your best results. Next is I would have two instances of EQ8. One instance of EQ8 would be like a surgical EQ. So I would go and look if there's little things that just could come down in the song. I would basically bring them down with something like this. It's a very nice clean EQ, and it does have a mid-side mode too. So if you want to affect something in the center of the song or the side of the song, you can do it with this sort of EQ. Next, I'd have another instance of EQ8, and the second instance of EQ8 I would use purely for boosting. And this it's just a mindset difference of like, what do you want to bring up? Like, do you want to bring up the overall like lows or highs or mids, and how does that sound? How does that affect the song? How does that affect the performance? How does it affect the energy and the emotion of the song? And that's what I'd do with this one. So I'd bring up something, possibly you don't have to use it, you don't have to use any of these things, but it's just like a rough guide. So I'd use this as my secondary EQ, and I would bring those things up. Next, you do have multi-band dynamics in Ableton, but I don't think it's very good. I think it's very fiddly, and if you don't know what you're doing with it, you can totally ruin a song. It's a lot to do with like upwards compression, upwards expansion, and it can be good. Like if you have a certain song that you want to increase the impact of it a little bit more, it can be very good for doing that, but I'd be very cautious when using this and know exactly what it does before using it. Otherwise you might end up with some really like intense results, really unexpected results, and things just sound worse, and you're just essentially boosting a lot of weird things on it. So I'd be very careful with that, but it can be good if you want to increase the impact of songs. Next, I would use the glue compressor by Ableton as well, and this is basically like an SSL style G bus compressor, I believe. And I remember shooting one of these out once. It sounded really good against the real one on a console. And I would kind of, you don't have to use this, but if you're going to use a bit of compression, just making sure, like what I find works for a lot of songs is just having like a very little amount of compression, so way under 5, like maybe a dB. You can't really see with the meter on this, it's not like perfect, but I would just kind of go through and try and find a point where it does sound good and just sort of suits the song. But I would generally have quite slow attack, quite fast release, like instant release, quite low ratio. Typically 2 is fine. It could be lower, but it only does 2 on this one. And you do have a little soft clip here thing too, but I'll just go through and make it very subtle. You can even do the dry wet to see if it's right, but you want to avoid pumping unless you want to make the song pump on purpose. Next we have Saturator. So again, use with caution, and learn the controls, what they do. If you hover over the controls, you can see on the left hand side like the display of what it does, but be cautious with it. And you can use a bit of saturation to kind of help fill in the gaps in the song and make it sound a little bit more energetic, but use it with caution. And dry wet amount, maybe play with that, just have a very low amount if you're going to have it at all. And then lastly, I would have a limiter at the end and use this, go through the settings, like maximize settings, pretty good if you're trying to make a song like a modern master limiter. It's very fast. You do have a clip mode too, so you could use 2 instances, use one for clipper, one for limiter. I personally don't love clippers, but they can be useful if you have a particular type of song where they sound good on, but use with caution and just try and get the song a bit louder with this too. Hope this helps.